All right, hello everybody. I am out. I'm having sick symptoms. I don't feel too bad yet, but I don't want to spread anything around. If I have anything, I got to do a COVID test later. So in the meantime, what I'm going to try to do is get you what you need, and I'll try to keep this reasonable so that we're not feeling overwhelmed. So our plan for today is to kind of finish up the stuff in chapter 2, and then kind of get you ready to start the next unit, which is starting in chapter 19. So you see the reading assignment for Thursday. If I open up today's stuff on Wednesday, you'll see some slides, and it'll have a review for the assignment that we had yesterday on research methods. So these are the 4 terms that you were supposed to define. I'm going to kind of run through this and then go through those 2 questions. You can check your answers. The nice thing about video is you can stop me or pause or rewind if it's going too fast. So take a look and check, because we want to make sure that this is making sense. We have 2 variables and 2 groups, and independent and dependent variables sometimes people get confused by and mix those up. So I want to kind of really make sure this is working for you. So independent variable, it says the factor that is being manipulated. Oops, wrong button. Factor that is being manipulated, the thing whose effect is being studied. So let's say we want to know if studying for a test is going to improve test scores. I would take one group, and we'll call those the experimental group. They will do some studying. I have another group, they're called the control group. They do not get the independent variable, so they don't do any studying. Which means the independent variable is the thing we're manipulating, right? Some people studying, some people not. The dependent variable then is, what is it that we are measuring? So in this case, we're measuring test scores. And so our hypothesis is that more studying leads to higher test scores. And so the way we're going to check to know if that's indeed true is by having a control group. So in theory, the only difference between these 2 groups is that one group is studying, one group is not. Okay. So as we go into these 2 examples, we have 100 people that have depression. 50 of them get 8 weeks of cognitive behavioral therapy. 50 get put on a waiting list for 8 weeks. At the end of the 8 weeks, they're all assessed on their levels of depression. So what are we manipulating? Whether they get the therapy or not. So the independent variable is the cognitive behavioral therapy. That's what we think is going to be having an impact. The dependent variable, what is it that we're measuring? And it says here their level of depression. Okay, so the control group, they do not get the independent variable. So these are the people on the waiting list. The experimental group, these are the 50 that get the cognitive behavioral therapy. Our second example, we're studying the effects of anabolic steroids on the aggressive behavior of female rats. So what is it that we are manipulating in this one? It says 24 of the rats get daily injections of a placebo, 24 get daily injections of a steroid. We haven't defined placebo yet. We'll actually talk about that later today. Placebo is a non-medicine treatment. So sometimes they'll call it a sugar pill. In this case, it would be an injection of like saline. So they're getting a shot, and there's some juice in the shot, but there's no medicine, okay? So the control group is the placebo group. They get no medicine, the 24 rats. The experimental group is the 24 that get the steroid injections. So what is it that we are manipulating? The steroids, right? That's the thing that some get, some do not get. What are we measuring then? It says all aggressive encounters will be counted and timed. So the dependent variable is the aggressiveness of these female rats. Okay. So again, if you rewind, listen to it again, reread that section. I think there's some examples in the book, and then that should help you sort these things out. If you know the terms, I think it helps to process your way through. The rest of today, we're going to talk about some of the issues related to research and some of the potential pitfalls for researchers. So it says here, our main idea, the investigation of psychological issues is a painstaking process. Psychologists must recognize and resolve errors while doing research. So what are some of the potential issues? Our first idea here is the self-fulfilling prophecy. And the idea with the self-fulfilling prophecy is that a person's expectations influence their behavior. So in the case of research, if the researcher has expectations that, the steroids are going to somehow influence the rats to be more aggressive, they might be subtly doing things to the experimental group to make them more aggressive, right? Influencing the participants' behavior. In the case of people, if I'm in that group that's on the waiting list and I'm not getting the medicine, is it possible that the experimental group that's getting the therapy is somehow being talked to in a way that gives them the impression that, oh, this therapy is really going to be helpful? And is that the thing that's changing behavior more than the specific therapy itself? So we want to avoid the self-fulfilling prophecy. How we can do that is with single-blind and double-blind experiments. So single-blind, the participants don't know which group they're in. So in the case of placebos, that's why they use placebos, so that you don't know if you got the medicine or not. Everybody gets a pill. They all look the same. One of the groups actually has pills with medicine. One, they have like sugar pills. In the case of a double-blind experiment, the experimenters and the participants don't know who is getting the treatment and who's not. Okay, so they don't know if they're in the control or the experimental group. And in that case, then the theory is that it's going to reduce the that kind of influence that the researchers might have on participants. Question up at the top says, what is the Hawthorne effect? There is a famous study where researchers were trying to study worker behavior in a factory setting. And so they go in and they have clipboards and they're taking data and they're watching the workers work. And then they start changing things like the lighting conditions and other aspects of what's going on in the factory. And it seems to the researchers like no matter what they do, the workers' productivity just gets better and better and better. And eventually they find out that the thing that's driving the worker behavior is not the lighting changes or whatever else they're doing. It's the fact that the researchers are standing there watching the workers. And the workers probably thought like, oh, if I don't do a good job, I'm going to get fired. Okay. So the thing driving behavior was not any of the other things that they thought were doing it. It was their presence. So think back to naturalistic observation, that idea that you don't want to influence what's going on around you. We talked about placebos. So I think we've kind of defined that. The placebo effect is the idea that people who get a placebo sometimes see benefits. And so then you're going, well, how is it that they didn't get any medicine, but they still are feeling better in the case of like a antidepressant or something? And the thinking is that the belief that a treatment can have an effect is sometimes as important as the actual medicine that comes from the treatment. This is a wild idea, and I have a video clip here. I'm going to suggest you watch it. I thought it was kind of the stuff that you hear about this is crazy. So there's something about the power of our own mind and just believing that like I'm doing something to reduce my depression, let's say, that alone might be the thing that helps more than maybe the pills I'm taking or some of the other things I'm doing. That's not to say that pills aren't useful. Okay, there's a place for that, but this is an interesting idea. So watch the video clip, pause me, and then come back to this. Last thing, we have ethical issues in research. So because we're dealing with human beings and animals also, researchers have to be taking into account the dignity and welfare of participants in their studies. They have rights. They have to kind of write up, an agreement about the responsibilities of both parties, and to even get their research approved by institutions, they have to have a plan in place for how they're going to treat people. They have to get consent, so you have to know that you're being experimented on, right? Surprise experimentation, probably not cool. The only time that deception can be used, deception is lying, is if by telling people what you're studying, that's going to ruin the kind of setup of things. So we'll actually see a couple examples of research in our next unit where deception is used because if they knew what was being studied, that it would just derail things right off the bat. So that is that is where we get into some criticism. When you start adding in some of those elements and people are not sure what's going on and then they're experiencing stress, that sometimes is problematic. So we'll talk more about some of those ethical things once we get into our next unit. So that's it for today. Short and sweet. I'm kind of doing this purposefully because I want you to have some time to start working on Chapter 19. If you need to finish up your research methods chart, that's a great plan. If you haven't finished your way through Chapter 1 and 2 and the study guide, you should finish that so that we can turn the corner and start talking about sociocultural psychology. And that's what we have on our agenda for tomorrow. As always, if you have questions while I'm out, you can email me and I'll do what I can to help you, but we'll make it through. Okay. Have a good afternoon. I'll see you hopefully soon.